All right, back down here to Chief's Pit, Timmy Petty, Mark Petty, and Richie Petty. Well, as you see on the table, we got an assortment of all kinds of little gadgets here. So we're going to explain to you a little bit about restrictor plate racing, and on the engine side, what we'd have to get into. And if you wondered why it was so expensive for restrictor plate racing, well, this is this is a little bit of it, because you'd always
definitely not everything.
No,
we've
it's
been
just
involved
it's
with.
just a little start
this
of
is
it.
just what that Daddy had in secret boxes that they had done back in the 60s and 70s.
I was going to start out when we were ARCA racing, and they had a restrictor plate in '89, I believe it was, and me and Mark was up there, and Daddy was we started messing with the engine. And Daddy told us, he said, go back there in the Chrysler
was
barn.
on the dyno.
Right.
And
he said, go back there to the Chrysler barn and look behind this shelf, behind this, and behind that. And there's a box of little rings. He said, bring them to me. Well, he brought it up here, and a lot of this, what you see, is what he sent us after. It's been sitting there for 20 years, right? So,
yeah.
But he still remember where it was at. But it goes back, 1970 was when they run the first restrictor plate. And I think NASCAR told him he was going to run it at Michigan in '70, and so that's what Daddy had got into. Is there anything here you want to kind of explain with that deal, with these rings and things?
Well,
one minute we got to shout out to the machinists that worked here, Curtis Wright and Stafford Wood and Shorty Pugh.
Yep.
And there may have been more, but those are the three. But I know Curtis Wright for sure was a big, huge, did the machining for Daddy on this stuff.
Well, into the wedge.
But a shout out to them. But back to what y'all were saying, just make sure, because they all worked hard.
Nobody, for sure.
But Roger Wasson was here earlier, and we had some episodes, and he was talking about Daddy having these little rings made and doing things, and this is what he was talking about.
It'd be more like them that go under the bigger carburetor. Right. That's Roger's air is the 4570.
Right.
But and the interesting part about this is,
well, they started out an inch and 11/16, right, was the size of the carburetor, and then when he went to 70 and put the plate on it went to what I say, inch and a quarter. Ain't that what it went to?
Well, those were actually bigger. The Dominators.
Okay.
But I know we're going to be all over the board on this, but anyway, the interesting part about it is that stuff that Daddy had stashed, and the stuff that I was already moved on to work for other teams, because the restrictor plate stuff had come along in late 80s.
Yeah, so we're talking 89, right?
Right, but 87 was when Bobby Allison had his bad wreck in April there, May, of the Winston 500, and then they came back to Daytona.
Well, they
with
tried to slow them down with a smaller carburetor,
and then they finally come back with the restrictor plate. But we'll get into that.
Okay.
Let's stay with the.
But so back to the story.
Well, the
restrictor plate had been around a couple of years. We got to messing with the ARCA car for Richie to go to Daytona.
Yes.
And that's when Daddy sent him back here to get this stuff, and then he just started working on it from there, and it just.
But people think of the restrictor plate of being the 80s and 90s in NASCAR, but 1970.
Well, they had restrictor rings, for sure.
And you can look at all these things that he had, and all the tapers and all the work. It's really amazing. But
that's what I was going to tell you about the taper.
Before we get into that, I was just going to explain this one thing. That up into 71, they had three different plates depending on what engine package you run. Well, the Fords did their little wedge deal, and they had a bigger plate. So all the Mopar guys were griping that they had a better plate. That's just racing, because you think they got an
went
advantage.
Back and forth with
right? Yeah. Everybody did. Well, that's exactly. So 71 Daytona, that's when the Mopar introduced the wedge-headed motor. And they went to Daytona, and the Dodge Plymouth was top four. You had Isaac, Petty, Baker in a Petty car, and then Pete Hamilton in Cotton Owens' car. And then the Ford guys were griping that they had a better deal. So anyway, let's get into your rings now. A little history there, a little background.
And I mean, there's so much technical stuff, and not just this place, but everybody that had to deal with these rings and plates and restrictor plates which came along. And
because what we would work, Daddy and us, we worked on from like 89 to 95, right?
So that looks about like the first one. I'm just guessing by the size.
Yeah, because it started out pretty big, and then they kept choking us down.
Well, yeah, and even the cup stuff too. And so I just remember some of Daddy's stuff, and the 7-degree taper in here, and everybody tried more or less, but that's what worked, and it would be under the stack. And then they give you a certain measurement where your tubes couldn't be but so much. So everybody had this like clover, 4-leaf clover, and then it looked more like
this.
Yeah, hold on. Sorry. It would have been like that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But so what happened was everybody was trying to, and you had an inch in between it because the plate, then you had another plate for it so the blades wouldn't hit that.
Right.
Your throttle blades. So the key to it was NASCAR knew that it would disrupt the air under it. So it was a 1-inch area. So what's everybody trying to do? Remember we did the skull can where you get up under there and work on this. But the key was getting that as close as you could to the top or direct the air, whatever size hole you had here, you try to do it with gasket. So then they started, I'm not telling near all the stuff, but NASCAR, when they first started doing this, you put they give you the plate and then you put it all together. Well then, you start aiming at the gaskets, and you can see Daddy had been working on that too.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. This goes back to the 70s, and these gaskets actually had a good taper on them.
Right. So if you took NASCAR's plate and then they got wise to it, people would try to take their pocket knife and just break the edge.
Because just a little bit was worth a couple of horsepower.
And so then you get into all this is under it. So all that mattered.
Now we're getting into the 90s. And I was going to say, I believe that the number was 6 to 7 horsepower was a mile an hour at Daytona. Remember?
And that was just as common.
And so that, like you're saying, taking that knife, if you get in there and just scrape that plate, that would give you that could get you in the race or the pole.
If you got caught manipulating their plate, or if it scarred it, which I'll get into that in a minute, you would obviously get busted for it, and they didn't want you messing with their plates.
Well, and everybody worked on it.
Right.
Every team.
But
it was huge.
And that's the reason why some of the rules were put into place, because they'd run it one time. Yeah. So interesting story. When they put the thing in the middle, which would have been in this part, sorry. I told you I'd be all over the place on this one.
You got 50 years of restrictor
and you had the thing that went all the way down. NASCAR would let you drill a hole because this would fill up with gas because it's inside the plenum.
I was afraid it was going to have back pressure and blow it off.
So, our place got wise, and we had a little thing that would drop down in there, and it would fit but it would suck up to the top. Well, got us busted because we had to put a little, it had rubbed us a hole in there. We weren't doing enough because other people were making this thing come up here.
Yeah.
So we went to Daytona in 1990, and I remember the inspectors coming there and talking to Harry Hyatt. Anyway,
that's when you was at Stravola's with the 8 car.
And he got over and he said, "Hey, there's something going on here," and they knew it was, and they could see where it was traveling, but then people had it so, and it didn't come all the way up, but it would travel up, and it was getting that hole closer, and I mean it was picking them up a ton. So they said, "How do we need to stop it?" And he said, he chewed tobacco and he spit a big old wad, and he walks over to the toolbox and grabs a daggum center punch and a hammer, and he said, "Make everybody take their carburetors off and go in there and do 4 corners so that thing wouldn't rise up." Well, they didn't know we still had the elevator in there.
Yeah.
So that did help some, but it didn't help as much as that. But I'm sure there's hundreds of stories from everybody involved, and there was other things that people could put in there.
They got into the deal where people were drilling tiny holes.
It was just directing air.
And they were trying to suck air, so then they'd put them collars on it, they'd spray that ether, and then they'd try to catch it.
Oh, yeah, and then some people had it where it would open up certain, yeah.
I mean, it wasn't so much cheating as it was just trying to
ingenuity.
Well, until somebody got busted with it, it wasn't cheating.
But everybody was trying to work around the parameters of the rules.
That's what made it fun, was all that.
But yeah.
But we would spend hours and days, like how we were talking earlier. I mean, you'd stay in here for 2 or 3 days on the dyno just trying to make a gain of 4 or 5 horsepower.
Everybody that's ever been involved, with the engine shop through that era, you didn't even think about going home. And you would find the power in the most odd places, you know, and then you realize where it was coming from. So you was always trying to do something under it to make it draw better, or you know, just and I'm sure everything got more efficient. You know,
that's an intake from '93 that we used for our Cup car, and you can just look at inside all the work that was done. But also not just in the intakes, you got into the heads. We were making them runners and stuff. You were grinding and stuff to direct air, and we thought it was more like directing air, but I think it was more or less changing the pressure in the cylinder a little bit. But we had been working day and night on the car. We'd been working day and night on the engines, and it was getting to be about 12 o'clock one Sunday night. And we had just broke the cam in because we were on a deadline because we had to be in Daytona Beach on that Thursday, remember?
Yeah.
And then so we broke the cam in. Everything was looking good. The Daddy was here, and the three of us were here.
Yep.
And we was all thinking we're gonna have to come back tomorrow to see what this thing's gonna run. We was excited because we'd made some changes, and the camshaft was a big deal. You know, you could change it, and you can make gains and stuff. But anyway, we all looked at each other, and it was about 12 o'clock at night. And we was kind of like, are we going to run this or not? And Daddy said, run it.
Oh, yeah.
So he was as excited. You know, like I said,
you got to remember, we're in level cross.
Tips.
We're in level cross, and we didn't run a muffler on our dynos. It's straight pipes. It's loud. So this
was
is
that the night the cops came?
Yes. So,
excuse me,
the
deputies.
Randolph
County deputies.
So we made a couple of runs,
and they had to jump the fence up here.
We made a couple of runs, and then the
we
deputies
didn't know they were out there.
Well, no, but they wasn't coming so much. They was making sure it wasn't.
Do you remember the backstory on that?
Yeah.
So the deputy gets here and they said, "We want to watch it run."
Yeah.
Remember?
Yeah.
They wanted to watch it, and they said we probably wouldn't have come out here, but there was one lady over here in the trailer court over here.
Did they wake grandmother and grandfather up and they call us?
No, they just come down here.
We were on the way out and we
said because they were beating on the door.
That's right.
But anyway, what happened was it wasn't even anybody around here. The way our building's set up, it runs down here to the creek in the holler. And it carried that sound over a mile from here.
She said, "I'm not worried about me, but it's going to wake up my little dog."
Well, it did. It woke up her dog, and she was fussing. But I'm saying it was over a mile from here. It was on Guilford County. It wasn't even Randolph County.
And we probably wouldn't have run again.
That power line.
We wouldn't have made another power pole. But the deputy wanted to see it. Remember?
Yeah.
Throwed it up
so
there and
anyway,
made another pole.
That was how we worked. We worked day and night, and then when we had an opportunity, especially with the restrictor plate stuff, you wanted to see what you had. Because
but you know, but everybody, all the motor people
did
that back then.
Oh yeah.
I didn't know it's, and like Timmy said, hundreds of people worked on it, and people could probably show us stuff too. But
well, it's
just
and I'm not by all means. I'm not saying I know it all.
No.
This was involved with it.
93. We had a lot of help from Bob Rahilly. He helped us a lot.
Yes, and that's where his intake probably come from.
Yeah, probably, and he helped us with some camshaft stuff too because they were still
Ford
involved
stuff.
with the Ford stuff. So yeah, it was everybody would help each other, but everybody wanted to outdo the other guy, but you also would help people too. But the funny thing to me was a lot of the stuff that people thought they were coming up with in the 90s.
Oh, it was definitely.
Daddy had already come up with in the 70s. So
yeah, very similar stuff. That's right.
And it was
on the right
so
track.
close. I mean, the same. I don't know how to solve the problem or the issue.
Now, what was
it was the same remedy.
What was our what?
Yep.
What did the plate take? It took you from like 750 back down to about 420.
Well, I think back then it was like 480. They didn't kill it a whole lot. Now, I mean, they even if toy would get you down around 400 horsepower. Remember?
Well, when we ran the Cup deal, when we ran our
53.
Yep, we was 400 to 430, depending on what the rules was when they.
Right.
If you had 430, it was good. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, well, we would, but I think we might have been. Yeah, there might have been some 440 and 450 stuff out there.
Oh, I'm sure there was.
Yeah.
I mean, we were a tiny outfit.
Cubic dollars makes cubic horsepower.
We did. Was close.
Very respectable.
Yep.
Because our dad's help. I got to give
absolutely a lot of folks' help.
Well, but I mean, he got us in the right direction, got us thinking right.
And don't kid yourself. Your hard work helped too.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, it kept you focused on what you could do, and kind of get you in the right parameters.
And it was fun.
Oh no!
But there again,
fun.
we were messing with engines. We was messing with the car bodies, putting the cars together. We was involved with it all. So we didn't have the luxury at some of these places. All they did was engine stuff.
Oh no,
stuff.
absolutely.
So, well, anything else you want to tie into the?
I think we've only scratched the surface here. This is gonna. If
Oh,
there's
yeah.
anybody really paying attention, there's a lot going on right here
Oh, yeah.
on this table today.
And that's
Yep.
why, like I said at the beginning, that's why it was so expensive to run restrictor plate stuff, because all the stuff you had to go into it, the test, and just the time put into it, wasn't it?
No doubt. And like you said, from what's that, 1970 to
I can't believe we still got all this.
1995 on this table, and then what they did after that.
I mean, because this is from the early '70s.
Oh yeah, that's
Yep.
crazy.
But-
Well,
Yeah, I'd love to
you're
get
fine.
somebody that was working on stuff back then, the old behemoths.
yeah, oh yeah.
That'd be fun to hear their take on it, because I'm sure it was a non-stop effort to try to make it better.
Yeah, it was.
No doubt.
It still is. Well, there's a little inside the restrictor plate racing. I know a lot of people don't understand it, and we still don't understand it, but this is a little bit of our family history. So we appreciate you stopping by. Like and subscribe, and stay with us.